So I'm back at this motherboard, the one that I thought I killed with heat. Actually, the one I did kill with heat. So I've been sort of puzzling at this board for just all of last night and even quite a bit this morning. So what I ended up doing is reflowing the main IC just to see like if it was because maybe I liquefied a solder ball under there and maybe it lost connection and it was just creating a like almost like a brick situation. That didn't do anything. I do have to, looks like I need to clean this area up a little better. So what I ended up doing after that is reflowing the connector again and giving it a nudge. Suddenly, it started powering up again. I still got an error has occurred, but at least I'm back to where I started. So the only, so I came to that thought and conclusion after sort of not just viewing the schematic, viewing a board scan or like a recreation of the board. So let me bring that up. So it's not that, it's this, which is a drastically different thing that I'm looking at. So here's the connector for it, and as you see, there's traces that go underneath the connector, which make perfect sense. So my prevailing theory is either when I bumped the connector reflowing it, maybe I accidentally crossed maybe like this line to ground, or maybe lost connection with one of these points, and then reflowing it and sort of bumping it back, reestablish that connection and brought it back into parity, so to speak. So now it's why exactly are components C60 and C59 grounding when, from my understanding, let me bring up the schematic again. Which tab was it? Here it is. When my understanding is they were almost in like a closed loop where they would come off of the Wi-Fi card. That resistor is unpopulated, and the only thing separating it from ground is this capacitor. Same with the V18. So my problem was I just, not that I misunderstood, I just didn't understand what this notation meant. V33 isn't some like pin designation. That's actually to signify a 3.3 volt rail. And as far as the motherboard is concerned, like the whole entirety of the motherboard, that 3.3 volt rail goes everywhere. So like right here, it connects into component U6. And over here at component U4, 33 volt rail. And over here at component U7, there's the 33 volt rail. And I even checked this, and it's a little hard because U7 is on the upper end of the board where the plug is on the bottom. I do get continuity between pin 1 and 8 all the way over to this pin when they aren't physically connected on the schematic, because I think this is just how schematic notation is to sort of simplify and clean it up, or else this would just be a chaotic web of... It would be an even more chaotic web than this, let's just say. So now it's, since both the 3.3 volt rail and the 1.8 volt rail are shorting to ground, something is allowing that both of those rails to go to ground. So far I was looking at component U7 and component U4. So what I just did, how I had everything kind of rigged up, is I was sort of looking around and sort of like randomly probing, and I did notice there was some crud right on the pins of U4. Like right up here, there was just like it was just like packed with stuff. I don't know what it was. So what I did is just tried to clean it up and reflow it. I just got done reflowing it before starting recording, so will that do anything? I don't know. It could have been whatever that crap was creating a bridge that was just shorting a whole bunch of pins together, and but in that case, I think the only argument against that is then that circuit should have been always open, not just only because that capacitor only shorts the ground when there's power after power goes through the board. So either I remove the capacitor, let me grip my multimeter here, not tangled up in my chair. I almost need to make a capture card for a multimeter. So the capacitor in question, I'm just going to stick with C60 because I'm going to guess wherever I fix it, it's going to fix it for both. So I think it's slowly going back to normal. It's slowly discharging. Because I think it shorts at like 80 ohms. And now we're at what would that be, 500? Like it's slow, it looks like it's slowly discharging. Does plugging in the Wi-Fi board do anything to that line? Will it discharge faster with it in? A little bit. Ooh, I noticed that my camera is starting to fray there at the connection. Well, I'll have to be careful with it. So it's discharging. So I think the only thing I can... Looks like it has high resistance when the Wi-Fi card's plugged in. Maybe. Unplug it. Because I'm testing resistance basically from ground on the entire 3.3 volt rail, not just of the capacitor. So I think the only thing I can do is just do a momentary pulse of power, which is just plugging it in. I don't think I'll put the Wi-Fi card in. Plug the battery in and just press the power button. What that will do is the blue light will momentarily come on and off. It's a failed boot sequence. Are we camera shy? Now that's curious. Let me just make sure all this power board's plugged in correctly. Alright, there it went. I think just the power board wasn't plugged in all the way. So, turns on, turns off. It's supposed to do that. Now let's check the capacitor again, see if it's shorting to ground. I'm going to bet that me reflowing U4 didn't do anything. I am interested to know if removing U7... So yeah, I'm getting a short to ground again. So let's look at the schematic again. So I reflowed U4, that didn't change anything, but that doesn't mean it's not faulty. U7 has a 33 and an 18 run to ground. But this is for like, I'm pretty sure U4 manages the sound. That would just be odd for it to fail. So really what I need to do is look for look for other components that have both V33 and V18 going into it. That's sort of blocked by resistors. And I think what I'm afraid of is finding that pretty much everything takes the V18 and V33 rail. There's a V2.8 or V28 rail as well. That's isolated by a capacitor, so I don't think that would matter. Not in my understanding, at least. Right now, my culprit is U11 on the back. The thing is I can't really test any of these components, because if it's shorting the entire rail to ground, it'll basically point a finger at everything, just saying all of these are bad. But it's one component that goes nowhere. Okay, that's handy. U7 seems to be the smoking gun, so to speak. That's like, this is the only component I've been able to find that has both a V33 and a V18 rail. So I think the only thing I can reasonably try is just removing it, and that's this little fella right here. It doesn't look faulty at all, but why it just sort of gave up. Let's just say I won't be surprised if it's not it. If it's something else, because I have no real reason to believe that this component's bad. I have to be careful because the shoulder button, or the face buttons are right there, and they would probably melt. This is sort of my only, like, reasonable assumption. That it has to just be this chip just failed. It's pulling the entirety of V33 and V18 to ground, when it shouldn't be. And my tweezers. Okay. So if this component was bad, then the only thing I can think of is now, if I put power into the board, I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if there's going to be like a sound issue, or even if the console will boot without this component. It's going to be looking into sort of what the rail does. Will it short the ground again? Or will it not? I'm not really into the idea of just replacing every IC that's on this rail without actually knowing what the problem is. So if it was the problem shorting to ground, then there shouldn't be a short to ground now. That via looks kind of cruddy. Okay. So, still a little warm. I don't necessarily want to put power into it when it's warm. So let me see if there's any change in this capacitor. Or just the rail, I guess. The capacitor is just sort of like the point of which I measure. So it's still shorting. But I don't think it would just immediately go away without discharging. Hmm. I guess let's just see what happens when I plug it in and put power to it. That's even if assuming if it will even try the boot without that component. I could just replace it off my junk board. Okay, I did get my blue light. I think the problem is it's just going to show me that short still, because it never discharged. So I'm not entirely sure what to make of that. I need to maybe just somehow short it into ground? Try and dump the extra electricity that was in that rail. I don't know if this is going to work. Because I'm making a quick short to ground. No, that didn't do anything. What's interesting is without that component, it just sort of holds open. Getting worse? I think my problem is just sort of interpreting what I'm seeing. Right now, both rails are shorting to ground. Without this component that I thought, well, no, I did not think it was faulty. I have really no reason to believe that this was bad at all. So let me see, it was pin 8 and pin 4. So that's pin 1. So pin 1 is part of V33. Go to continuity. There's a dot right there. Was that pin 4? I might have to double check how I had this oriented. Yeah, okay, that was pin 1 up there. I can just check another board. So pin 1 is the V33 rail. And then pin 4 is ground. That's kind of curious. It was like pulsing to ground. So the resistance value is climbing pretty quickly. So 1 and 4. And we're at 12 kiloohms. So the rail is restoring. I can just try and boot the thing with screens. Just kind of see what happens. I'm still not suspecting that as a fault. But that sort of like pulsing to ground, I think might be a clue. To what it means, I don't know. But it seems a little specific. Meaning that I think it's a little too specific to be an accident. Or a fault of my meter. Or of me holding it against those points. I would have to like solder wire to it and then like hold them against my probes to like make sure that it's just not because I'm doing it by hand and I'm just sort of fumbling. Kind of curious to know what happens without this chip. What the point of it is. Getting no power again. I'm kind of wondering what that means. If that might be a clue as well. Or I think I might just be fatiguing this power connector a little too much. The negative line is starting to show. Oh, that might be it right there. Yeah, I broke the negative line on this power board. Oh, well, okay. I didn't want to do that, but you know, again, just fatiguing of test parts. I ripped the positive and the negative off. Oopsie. I can replace that, but that's not what I want to deal with right now. I have spare wire. I can just refeed into those connectors. So let me grab another power board. Well, the great sacrifice some of these test parts need to do. I'm guessing there's like little prongs that go into those male connectors that I'm probably not going to be able to solder to, so that might just have to be a scrap board. Okay. But with how often I use that test board, it lived a good life. Ooh, yeah, that sounds awful. Okay. And no, that didn't do anything, but that component definitely has something to do with sound, because this console sounds awful. I didn't think that was the problem, and I've been proven that no, it is not the problem. But I had to check. There it is again. 80 ohms. I doubt it's... I just don't really like the idea of just removing ICs indiscriminately. But I don't think I have another choice. It's possible that the crud on U4 blew it. I really am not under the assumption that that's true. But right now, I'm just sort of gonna, again, just kind of Hail Marying it and just sort of seeing if removing any of these chips fixes the issue. So let's get U4, or let's get component U4 off and just see if it does anything. Maybe the crud along that chip that I saw maybe shorted it. And now it's sort of behaving this way. I mean, it does have to drive a speaker, or a pair of speakers, so maybe... I won't speculate. Right now this board is junk, unless I can do something about this error has occurred. And I'm reasonably confident to say that I reflowed the connector enough that it isn't the connector. Oh god, I don't think my tweezers are big enough to grab this big fucking thing. That works. I just shoved it up. Yeah, it looks like it came off pretty good. I didn't rip off a leg. So it looks good underneath there. Now I think the problem I'm gonna have is just... Now what? Because I don't think the short would have discharged. in that, or would it have just immediately reverted if that was the problem component? No, it's still 82 ohms. So while it cools down, I'm just going to sort of keep looking at the schematic. Because this one has a line to V18 and V3. Multiple lines of V33. And also multiple lines to ground. So if that was a faulty component, then it just, someone stands to reason that that's a problem. Especially since the connection only opens when power is given to the board. It has to be an IC of some type, because it can't just be like a bridged solder point. So let me just see if I can find if V33 goes into any other chip. VCC. Like, unless it's the CPU. Which I did reflow it just to try and fix my power issue, and that didn't change anything. I would not be too opposed to reballing that whole reballing the CPU, but that is a task. Hopefully I have solder balls that are small enough or big enough. I do have some kicking around, and I probably have solder balls that would work. This is the connector. U3 is a power management chip. I feel like I would have this. I feel like if some of these components were just broken or blown, it wouldn't just be like one part of the chip is blown. Like when the shorting of the 33-volt rail, wouldn't that cause sound issues? Because the sound chip is part of the 33-volt rail? Or not 33-volt, but 3.3-volt rail? You'd think I would have sound issues. Like staticky, or it just sounds awful. I'm actually not sure what's going to happen when I try putting power through this board. But I'm going to get it set up again. And at this point, it's sort of a nothing ventured, nothing gained type of situation. I'm just wanting to see what happens. Like, because this would simulate almost like this entire chip has failed. So what exactly would happen, or what would those symptoms look like? I don't think it would fail a post. It's either, I'm probably not going to hear anything. I think it'll just be no volume. That's about the only thing I can think of. Did I plug in a Wi-Fi card? Yes, I did. Okay. what I seem to be missing is the chip I just pulled off. I don't know where I put it. It's a small chip. I got kind of lost in me trying to figure out what's wrong. I seem to have misplaced. I tossed it over like, to the side. It's a pretty large chip. It'll show up somewhere. So let me just see what happens. Nothing ventured. Boots, no sound. Yeah, that's exactly what I expected. So no, that didn't fix it. Kind of like what I expected. So it was neither of those components that are shorting to ground. But it has to be something. It's possible that since it could still be one of those components, because right now there's sort of like an active short to ground. I don't know if that's just because no, I'm just gonna take a moment to see if I can find that power management chip wherever it went. Because if that like because if it's holding voltage, or it's sort of like holding that rail open, should it just go away immediately if I remove the problem component? Because it's just going to be holding it open. And what's interesting is it is holding it open. Something is. Like, it's not dissipating. I don't think I can voluntarily discharge it. If I can even, like, discharge it. I'm also rather perplexed at where that sound chip went. Thought I put it off to the side, but I don't remember. So unless I can somehow revert that discharged state back to normalcy, I don't know if I'm going to get an accurate test. Where did that chip go? The power board I snapped the connector off of. Oopsie. I didn't place it anywhere special. I'm guessing I dropped it in. sticking to my boards. Wouldn't be under my mat. Huh. I may rewatch this VOD real quick. I pulled it off, and I don't remember what I did with it. One of the many mysteries of this world, I suppose. Okay, so here's me removing it. Put it right there on the end of my paper towel. Ah! I put my Omnivice on it. Problem solved. Okay. So, what's keeping it high? Low resistance to ground. Or something. Trying to make sense of things I don't understand. So removing both of those chips does not bring me back up to parity. I don't know if like voluntarily trying to discharge this with like a wire will do anything. Or will that just make the problem worse? Does it mean that the ground is discharged? I don't know what that means. Right now it is shorting the ground, so making a short to ground wouldn't make sense. I think the only way I was able to get rid of that short was by removing the capacitor. I really don't want to remove those again. They're kind of a pain. They're a lot, chips are a lot easier, but I don't necessarily have a choice. So I'll remove it and see if it goes away on both rails. I think that would be a pretty good indicator that it is an IC on both rails. So now let's see what the rail looks like. So it's still shorting. What about the 18 rail? It's a little harder to grab onto. The 18 rail is still shorting. What's interesting is now the shorts are harder to dissipate. What I never did check was if the 18 volt rail was shorting the ground, would that pull the 33 the ground? I think the only problem with that sort of assumption is I think the CPU is the only thing left that has both the 18 and the 33. I just have to triple check before I go removing that thing, because once I remove it, it is a reball. The 33 line. This is U4. This is the sound chip I removed. 18 goes into an unpopulated resistor. But it connects to 33. U1 is the main CPU. VCC. It's just weird that it seems like such a benign error for what I almost see as a rather grand problem. If the 3.3 volt and the 1.8 volt are shorting to ground, you'd think that would sort of make a whole mess of problems. Like, I guess not being able to open applications is a large problem, but it functionally renders the device unusable. It's just odd to have such a relatively, like, a benign symptom. Like, yeah, can open applications, but the U3 power management chip doesn't directly handle, only through a capacitor. V33 right there, so it handles V33. I don't know. I really don't know. Hope it's not the CPU. Short's still there. But the CPU is the only culprit. I mean, it has to be. Like, I really don't want to take it off. Man, dude. The top and bottom screen connectors. Those won't really do anything for me. V18 SLC V33. What is U8? I mean, there was this small capacitor over here that was just sort of cattywampus for some reason. I really don't think that would be a problem. See if it's connected. Yeah, it's connected. I think that's not a problem. U8. Just looking at the silk screen to try and find what U8 is. U8, right there. It's another little feller. Well, I hate to yank another chip, but this does have a U18 and a U33 connection, kinda. So it's pin 1 and pin 2 are going to be probably shorting to ground, because that's the 18 rail. Pin 1 should be right there. Pin 1 and pin 2. Capacitor through capacitor 99, which is that little feller down here. What? Why aren't I getting a ground through here? Oh, that's a diode test. Six kilo ohms? There, normal, okay. I guess I'll remove U8. Now this controls the 33 volt line to the SLC, so this might prevent the console from turning on. Sort of the consequence of me removing this one. At this point, I'm just kind of ready to try anything. Anything that's even remotely close to the truth, I'm just gonna try. This could be another just sort of removing chips just for the hell of it. I'm not necessarily a fan of, but I'm a bit out of options. And it's a learning experience, what can I say? So now pin 1 and pin 2 should be not shorting to ground, I think. So pin 1 and pin 2, there should be no short. Ooh, the board's still warm. I don't know how well of a connection I'm actually getting. 4 kiloohms. Let me check the capacitor, as that's sort of my like common reference point. Or at least the pads that the resistor sat, or the capacitor sat on. No, it doesn't. It's 121 ohms. Um, because I think on a normal board it should be 2.6 kiloohm. Like a normal short is 2.6 kiloohms. I didn't actually see what the normal board looks like when it's powered up. But here's what it is flanking the capacitor. It's like 2.6. Looks like it might be 2.8 kiloohms-ish. Let me put power into my normal board. And just to see what the resistance value is. So no, removing none of those did anything. I'm still back to a short. Okay, well, let me just keep looking then. Because there should be no line that the V33 can go to ground. Like, I'm removing everything where the V33 and the V18 go to ground. I think the only thing I can do is remove the main IC. And just, I don't know, see if it goes away, or is it bridged? Should I try and reflowing it first? I'm just trying to see if there's any other V33s and V18. Anything at all. V33 goes right here into 3 empty resistors. Component U9 does connect to the Wi-Fi. It's for the clock signal. But why would the clock matter? No, that wouldn't short everything to ground. Not like this. And again, it can't be a shorted. So here's V33. Does it get V18 at all? It's V28. Reset. V33. V18 goes through a capacitor. The battery plus. I think because they go into capacitors, I would think that would sort of isolate it from ground. Especially 2 of them. It'd be weird if both of those were blown. What's weird is there's an 80 ohm resistance short to ground. That 80 seems specific. A little too specific to just be a full short. But for them to both be 80 resistance short to grounds, and for it to exist, I did reflow the main APU. That was the chip I removed. 33. That's the EEMC. Game card slot. I don't know if I want to remove the main IC. For it to have an internal short to ground. Well, Because the IC is the only other component that has... I just have to... I just need to be absolutely sure. Because they're shorting to 80 ohms again. Before I do anything crazy... So V33, V18, that one's removed. V33, V18 doesn't connect because it hits a unpopulated resistor. V33, the VCC, V33, V18, I removed that one as well. V18, V33, this is a plug, and if it was shorting to ground, like I'm not even plugging in the Wi-Fi card when I power it. If this was shorting to ground, it would be a persistent ground shortage. It wouldn't back off. V33. V18 and V33 are... At what point do I say that like multiple chips are blown? Because I find that to even be less likely. What's U8? Oh, U8 was one of the ones I removed. I may have to do more research on this before I do anything too crazy. I think I might pull the main chip off of a junk board, and just to see sort of what the resistance value does. If it stays the same, or if it might just completely lose all resistance connection, implying that, like, if I were to remove the main chip on the main board, that doesn't tell me anything. Even if the short, like, disappears, it may just say there's no continuity to ground at all. No resistance or anything. So I'm going to research that and maybe get at it a little later. I just need to try and rationalize what's going on.